Yo, what is up guys? It is Dorki, and we have our probably most anticipated class here, Guardian Druid. Oh, we're blasting, I'm not even tanking him. Well, like as you can see, I'm trying to do damage here. And I'll just be briefly going over it real quick before we jump into the whole build. But first of all, I'd like to say that I would highly recommend Bear Druid for anyone who's looking to get into tanking, or people who just want a simple but effective tank. So anyways, the basic resource of Bear is if they use Rage, which is gained through thrashing or mangling, or just by getting meleeed or meleeing the mob itself. And you can spend this with Iron Furs here, which is your basic form of mitigation, and you should be spamming this. However, you could also spend it on Frenzied Regeneration to heal you up. And that's really all there is to it in terms of the basic gameplay. Now you could also spend it on Maul, which does a bit of damage, but it's so unimpactful that you should almost never use this. And aside from that, you just spam Swipe as a filler. Now for your defensive ones, you have a Bark Skin on a very short cooldown that is pretty powerful right now. And your larger CD is Survival Instincts. And your only offensive one is Incarnation, which will allow you to spam for, well, initially this is Berserk, but I talent this into Incarnation. And if you use this, you can spam Furs while being able to spam Mangle and Thrash as well for a lot of rage. For Guardian Druids, you actually have a lot of options for your build. For the first row, you generally go for Blood Frenzy, but you could go for Brambles if you want extra damage. I would only go for Brambles if you're doing easier content. For the second row, you can definitely go Renewal or Wild Charge. I personally prefer Renewal just because it's a health stone on a 1.5 minute cooldown, whereas Wild Charge just helps you with mobility. Down here, all these affinities have their own uses, but I think Rest of Affinity is the safest. You do get Ursul's Vortex with this as well for kiting. And with Balance Affinity, you do have Extended Range, which also helps you with kiting and Typhoon. Now for this row, all these options work. Mighty Bash if you need a stun, Mass Roots if you're doing some sort of cheese or if you just need root for some reason, and Heart of the Wild if you want to either increase your damage from Balance and Feral, or if you want to be able to heal more during Rest of Affinity. Now for this row, people usually ask me the most about Galactic Guardian or Incarnation. Galactic Guardian helps you a lot with damage, but it doesn't really do much defensively, whereas Incarn, it's a really huge defensive cooldown when you have it up. You can either use it on really scary pulls or you can use it on dangerous bosses. So when Incarn's up, you can basically just spam Thrash and Mangle over and over, but you can also spam a lot of Furs and you can use Frenzied Regen on a really short cooldown. As for this row, Earth Warden is generally the go-to, but in certain builds, which I will go over later, you can go for Survival of the Fittest and it will help you a lot with huge tank hits. So when you're doing dungeons or bosses that have a lot of tank hits, Survival of the Fittest is probably the way to go. As for the last row, you generally don't worry about it too much, you only go Ren and Tier. These two are mostly for raid talents. So let's go over Guardian Legendaries real quick. I think the general go-to is the Natural Order's Will. With this legendary, and because of how Bark you can spam pretty much every single pull, you're extremely tanky during it, to the point where you're practically unkillable. You can also use this for very large tank hits a lot of times. Now you could also go for Ursoc's Fury Remembered, which makes you immortal during very large pulls and Incarnation being up. So when you're doing either easier content or you're doing MDI setting types of pulls, having Incarn plus this in very large pull makes you unkillable, because of the amount of absorbs you get from spamming Thrash over and over. Now there are other options such as Loofahs if you really want the extra damage, but I would highly recommend either going Ursoc's Fury or Natural Order. Now for Covenants as a bear, it's actually a pretty hard choice because every single one of them is good. In this situation, I would say either go for the one you like, go for the one you enjoy playing the most with, or go for the one that helps your off specs the most. Such as if you're playing Resto, you might have to consider playing Night Fae. Or if you're playing Balance, you might consider Kyrian or Venthyr. If you're looking at Venthyr is only really good offensively every 3 minutes. And if you're looking at Necrolord is probably the most offensive option in M+ at the moment. This is sort of my go-to, but if this Serrated Spalders here gets nerfed, I would probably think twice about this. So between Necrolord and Venthyr, those are probably the two most offensive. But there's also the option of Night Fae, where if you're using Convoke in either Boomkin form or Feral Affinity form, you can do a lot of damage. But at the same time, Night Fae is also extremely flexible because you could use it in human form for an insane amount of group healing, or you could also use it in bear form, where I would rotate between Incarnation and Convoke for a defensive bear option. So the way I would play Convoke is you would go into one pull, use Incarnation, and then for the following pull you would have Convoke. Convoke, while it may not seem that strong in bear form, you actually get a lot of fur and you get a lot of rage during it. So you could have up to anywhere from like 10 plus seconds of consistent 2 to 3 stacks of fur. And for the last option, which is Kyrian's all around really powerful. It's pretty strong defensively while having some defensive or some offensive components to it. So for which Covenant you should choose, it honestly comes down to whatever you like. Me personally, I'm thinking either Night Fae or Necrolord. Necrolord if this doesn't get nerfed. But if this does get nerfed, I'll probably go Night Fae. Now, as for the Conduits, Bears actually have really good Conduits. For the defensive options, I think almost every single one of these are good. Innate Resolve is my always go-to. Tough as Bark, I would say it's between this and Well-Honed Instincts. Well-Honed Instincts actually helps a lot with getting extra frenzied regens. But you could also go for Layered Main, and me personally, I like to go for Innate Resolve with Well-Honed. However, you could also opt in for Tough as Bark, especially if you're playing with the Bark build. Now for Finesse, I find that Tireless Pursuit is actually really huge. Because a lot of times you can actually just go into Doe form, like right now. And then when you initiate a pull in Bear form, you have all this extra little speed that'll help you out with picking up the mobs really quickly. Now, Born Anew is also really helpful for when you battle res your allies, because 20 primary stats is actually a really big deal in Shadowlands. It's basically giving them a full entire food buff. Now for potency, I would say the only important one really is this one, the one that gives you haste during Berserk. You could also go for your Covenant option, if your Covenant option is okay, such as Night Fae one or Venthyr one. As for stats, as a bear, you want a lot of verse with a lot of haste. You could also go for Mastery. Mastery is a really good stat too. But in general, you just want everything aside from crit. Crit is probably the least useful option. So for me personally, I would go for Verse, Haste, and Mastery. Okay, so let's go over some gameplay footage here. We're in a 17 Fear of Pain Fortified, which is extremely high at this item level. And we're about to fight the deadliest pack in the game. We've got a captain with 2 conscripts, and as you've seen, if you watched my Blood Decay video, you would know that these mobs do an extreme amount of damage. So the captain here, it buffs all these mobs by 25% extra damage, on top of reducing the damage taken. And as for build, we're playing Incarnation with Night Fae, Bark Legendary, and the Bark CDR one. So we have an extremely tanky build. Now we go in this pack. I do have Incarn saved for this Poe. I Incarn this Poe, and at this point I'm holding on to my Bark because I'm a little bit afraid, but at the same time I do have Incarn rolling, and you kind of don't really want to overlap them. But then I'm like surprised by how much damage I'm taking. Like I get chunked down extremely hard even with 3 furs and Incarn up. So here we just end up popping Bark too. And the thing with this pack is that your healer can't heal you much because your team is getting shot down by these Arbalists. And here you can see Team Dorki goes down by all these shoots. I have 5 stacks of fur rolling right now. So here's the nice thing about this week, where you you want to be constantly keeping track of how many furs you have up. So here it says 6, but that doesn't mean you have 6 at once. It means that you have 6 except some are fading and some are just refreshed. So this is like a really good way of gauging how many furs you realistically have at any given time. Now our incarn is running out soon. We still have a lot of furs rolling. Wizrat is dying. Cryptix is in a bit of trouble too. At this point I run out of incarn, so I pop my trinket here, which gives me a very large absorb. And our team is looking pretty grim. Fix Havoc might die soon. We do end up killing the captain and we get the link, so I'm a little less worried. Now it's just the 4 mobs, but we're still in a lot of trouble. And at this point we have 1 fur. We're in a pretty dangerous spot. We do get a second fur out, and it's like I said, keep track of how many furs you actually have rolling. 1 is actually running out sort of soon, and we have 1 fresh one. Both teammates have a bleed on them, so that means they're taking a lot of damage. We do have Bark here, which I think I probably pop. Yeah, I end up popping Bark here. Team Dorki is dying again. And I'm just dragging these mobs over to the Arbalest, because these Arbalists, for whatever reason, like to run around. It's still looking pretty bad though. Fix Havoc is still dying, and Wizrat actually just gets shot down. And here's the thing I was saying earlier. I run out of Bark, I run out of Incarn, now I can Convoke. When you Convoke, it's basically another mini Incarn. I'm gonna Convoke here, and we end up getting, let's see. So we have 2 stacks of fur, which was a bit unlucky, but we do have 100 rage saved up from it. And I end up getting another 3 stacks of fur. So normally you wouldn't be able to get this many furs when you're not playing with either Convoke or Incarn. Now I'm actually all alone. Like, Cryptix is dead. Fix Havoc is about to die soon. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe we just like get out of here or just go again. But our team still wants to go, so I'm like, alright, I'll just try to live. So I do press Frenzy Region here. We drop a Nurse Soul so I can run away. Now at this point, I'm not taking damage, so I can just hold my furs, hold my rage. My team is almost fully back, so I do have Bark. That means I can safely go in. I go in, I probably pop Bark here. Yeah, so we've got 4 stacks of fur rolling with Bark up. We're extremely tanky. So at this point, the pull's pretty much over. It should be secured easily. We've killed one of the Arbalists. There's only 1 shooting our team. And I should be tanky enough to survive this. We also have Cryptix able to heal us now that he's not busy spamming the entire team. But that is it for the most part. So in short, you want to have Incarn, and then when you don't have Incarn, you want to have Convoke. And even without those, you have Bark in between. Now, tanking this pack for like what, an entire 2 minutes? That's actually almost impossible for any other tank aside from Bear. That's part of what makes Bear so strong right now, is that we have so many different CDs that we can go through. We have Bark on a very short cooldown. We can rotate between Incarn and Convoke, and we have 2 stacks of Wall on a really short cooldown. Aside from that, you also have a bunch of little off heals such as Frenzied Regen and Renewal if you have to. But yeah, that is basically it for the Bear gameplay. Thank you all for watching. Please make sure to comment, subscribe, like. Keep rooting on Poe. Okay.